The Matt Patrick Show, KPRC AM 950, and very pleased to have, a good friend of mine, Texas Congressman Mike McCaul, who is also the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Matt.
Hope you are well, sir.
I am. I like that song, too, On the Border.
You know, I'm thinking to myself, I have some good walking music for you when you come on. So that's good stuff right there.
It was very good. Very appropriate.
Indeed. Now, this is very interesting. You just released this. You're coming to Texas. You're bringing the show on the road. You're coming to McAllen, and explain why you're coming. I mean, I certainly understand, because this is ground zero as far as what is taking place on the border. What do you hope to achieve?
Well, we want to call attention to this crisis, which is exactly what it is. And, you know, these now we have refugee camps being set up in the United States of America, which I never thought we would see. So I want to bring members of Congress who may not be from the border down to see this DHS intake center where the children are processed, and then hold a field hearing with our governor, Steve McCaul, who's the colonel DPS, and then the Rio Grande Valley sector chief with the Border Patrol, who I think is going to give us a pretty unvarnished state of what is really happening down there. When I talked to him on the phone, he told me that they're apprehending 250 children per day just in that sector alone. So Matt, this is a crisis. I talked to a member from Peter King from New York who told me that they're looking at opening a warehouse in his district up in New York to house these children. And so it's a problem, but I also want to look at solutions, how we can stop this. And I think the best way to do as a federal prosecutor, you can't stop illegal conduct unless you have a deterrent value out there. And I think the message of deterrence in terms of, we're not open for business. If you get here, we're not going to let you stay. We're going to have mandatory detention and removal. I personally think that's about the only way you can stop what's happening right now.
So, and I agree. So the understanding that most of us have, Chairman, is that these families in Honduras and Guatemala and other countries in South America think that all they got to do is get their kids in there, they get a permiso, and, they're going to travel through the United States. So they put their children, these unaccompanied minors, with drug cartels,
right.
Organizations of the worst of humanity on this planet. I don't know what parent does that, regardless of how bad things may be at home. To put your child, I'm talking an 8, 9, 10-year-old, in a situation where they got to go from Guatemala to Texas through Mexico with drug cartel members. There's something missing in this scenario to me. As a parent, you're a parent, I'm a parent. Who does that? And for what purpose? I just don't believe that it's simply because the violence is so bad where they are. You're going to put your child in that situation? A lot of them are going to die on the way.
Well, and that's exactly right. I think the number one goal here is to really protect these children from a very dangerous journey that they take. Because you're right, Matt, when they leave, and they're all coming from Central America, what happens is the cartels and the traffickers market this for $5,000, $8,000. We can take your child, across Mexico into the United States. Typically, it's the Los Zetas, the most lethal cartel that are with them. We're finding a lot of these children just traumatized. They've been abused, exploited, in some cases sexually exploited at a very young age, and some actually killed because they want to show an example to the other kids, or they didn't get the money. It's really an awful experience, and it's a president's executive order that he issued that basically said that if you're a child in the States before 2007, you can stay. And what the cartels and traffickers have done is taken that executive order and said basically, this president says if you get in, you can stay. So
now I will ask you the same question I have asked Senator Cruz, the Attorney General, Congressman Cuellar and Poe, and all of the different lawmakers that I talked to this week. The administration is telling the American people, my God, we had no idea. When did this happen? What happened? I heard about it on the news. They're just now realizing that this could be a problem, the policies of this administration, and exactly what you just said. Do you believe that? Do you believe that the administration was caught flat-footed?
No, there were warning signs. Even back in January, this notice that the Department of Homeland Security put out about up to 65,000 new ACs coming in, that was in January. So they saw this coming. It came, and now they're scrambling to deal with it in a humanitarian way. But again, we're not going to stop this. We're not going to be able to protect these children from the abuse they're getting, along the way until we send the message of deterrence. Look, we're not open for business. You're not going to be able to stay if you get in. Yeah, we did this in 2006. The Brazilians were coming up like this, and this is what the Rio Grande Valley sector chief told me. He said it wasn't until we instituted mandatory detention with removal did it stop. And he said once we did that, the Brazilians stopped coming. But as long as they think they can get in and the cartels are manipulating this and making a ton of money off this, they're going to exploit it.
Was that as bad in 2006 as it is now?
No.
I'm under the impression this is as bad as we have ever seen it.
This is the worst I have seen it, and I was, as you know, a counterterrorism federal prosecutor, dealt with the border. I've been dealing with this issue for a long time. This is the biggest crisis I think I've seen on the border, and with that, you're going to see more legislation coming out to deal with it. But also the policies of this administration need to change. The other thing is Mexico's got to cooperate with us and start securing their southern border as well to keep these Central Americans out.
So I agree. So that was my next question. So Mexico, I mean, we're only talking about half of the equation. Mexico is doing little or nothing, it appears to me. So here, explain this to me. We've got all of this humanity coming into Texas. We've got all of these children coming into Texas and gang members and God knows who else. And we've got a Marine sitting in a Mexican jail for 3 months that we can't seem to get out of there. It seems to me that Mexico has a much clearer understanding of how to enforce their border than we do here in the United States. How do we get Mexico? I mean, I think we should treat our border the way it seems Mexico treats theirs. You come over here, we're going to throw you in jail. And that Marine, by the way, should be out.
Well, yeah, there's a couple issues there. One is Mexico's cooperation. And Matt, you may not like this, and your listeners may not. We've appropriated monies to go towards securing their southern border. We have actually offered to bring, what's called Northcom, Southcom, or military that could help seal that overnight. I'd like to see that happen in this country, but posse comitatus prevents that from happening. So and that's a certain law. But, we've got to get both these borders secure, my judgment. With respect to the Marine, I talked to the Mexican ambassador about it, and I said in the interest of goodwill between our nations, just doing the right thing, why don't you release him? And the response was, well, he has a court date. He just got a new attorney, and we feel very optimistic about the outcome of that hearing. So we'll see what happens when he appears in court. I'm hopeful that he's been down there for how many months now that they'll just say, time served, we're going to let you go. They know that a lot of lawmakers like myself have raised it as an issue. They don't want the bad publicity in the United States, and I think hopefully they're listening, and they get our message loud and clear.
We're talking to the chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, Texas Congressman Mike McCaul, joining us this afternoon. So we look at this border and we see the children coming across as parents, as just people that have hearts and feelings, and what we've heard, the descriptions of what these kids have been through. We feel bad. What do we do with those that are here? My understanding is, from what people tell me, they're here. They're not going back. I mean, 90% of them are here for good. What do we do with them?
Well, here's the deal. 14 and older, they can be detained and removed. That's not happening right now under this administration. I've called upon this administration to do just that, and I think that would – most of them are 14 and older, so I think that would take care of a lot of the problem right there. The other issue, if they're 13 and younger, there was a law passed in 2008 that requires Customs and Border Patrol to hand the child over within 72 hours to Health and Human Services, who then deal with the child in a humanitarian way. And under the law, it says what's in the best interest of the child. And that's been interpreted to mean if they have family in the United States, they can reunify with their family. We are currently looking at changing that law so that their hands won't be tied, if they're 13 and younger. But this is also an issue, Matt, that I think the churches, the clergy, talk to Catholic bishops about helping us in terms of messaging so that these kids just don't make this dangerous journey in the first place. Many of them are, as I said, abused, exploited, killed, some on the way.
And so this is better? This is better than what they're leaving? I mean, this is what I can't imagine. They say we're leaving all of this violence, yet look at what happens.
And I don't think they realize when they leave what they're even getting into. The ones they have that blank look on their face, like their eyes, they're traumatized, and they're just sort of staring off into space. And you can tell they've been through a horrific experience, and I think that's what we really need to focus on stopping.
Congressman, let's talk a little bit about the other folks that may be crossing the border. We have over in Iraq that situation taking place where that is, collapsing into chaos, and ISIL wants nothing more, I think, than to bring that to our doorstep at some point. So, God knows who else is coming across that border and what their intentions may be. We heard former Vice President Dick Cheney with kind of an ominous claim that he doesn't think we escaped this decade without some kind of horrific attack in this country. That's another very big concern of mine. Aside of the children coming across, God knows who else is coming in here.
Well, and let me say that the situation in Iraq and Syria with, whether you call it ISIS or ISIL, it's the Islamic State in the Levant, which is Syria and Iraq. That is the top number one threat to the homeland. And I say that because these guys are so brutal and such savages that even core Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, has denounced them as being too extreme. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah, when Al-Qaeda denounces you as being too extreme, that is. But I mean, we're laughing about it, and you have to sometimes. You have to laugh. But I mean, that's coming this way. There, at some point, that they will be a staging ground for another attack.
Well, and when I get my threat briefings, and I get them often, this is always at the top of the list. Why? Because they've created an Islamic State that doesn't know any borders. It's the largest terrorist training ground now in the world, surpassing anything that we saw in Afghanistan and Pakistan prior to 9/11. And so with that comes a threat of not only a threat to the region's stability in Iraq, but also to the homeland. And so remember, a lot of these, you have Americans there, you have Europeans, you have people from Australia, many of whom have legal travel documents to get into the United States. So from my perspective, where I sit as Chairman of Homeland Security, this is the threat, the biggest threat to the homeland that I want to see kept outside of the United States and outside of our borders, which goes back to what you're talking about, and that is the border security issue.
All right, so Thursday, July 3rd, noon in McAllen, you've got your field hearing. You're taking the show on the road, leaving Washington, which I always think is a good idea, and coming to Texas, which I also think is a very good idea.
Yeah,
you'll have the governor, Steve McCraw, DPS head of DPS, Kevin Oakes, Chief Patrol Agent, Rio Grande Valley Sector. And, let's talk about, Texas taxpayers are also dumping, what are we paying, $1.34 million a day or a week to enforce our borders. So that's coming out of our pockets here.
Oh, yeah, and I know the governor is going to be pretty vocal on that issue, that this is not a state responsibility. It's a federal responsibility under the Constitution, and as such, the federal government should be paying for this. And I completely agree with him, on that. And I just... I have this border security bill, but the department's not implementing anything. They're not doing their job. I've had many conversations with the secretary about how they need to ramp up these efforts, get assets that we had in wartime and get them down on the border. But, look, if all these kids can come in, what about the next terrorist?
Absolutely.
And that's my biggest concern.
Chairman, I want to thank you for your time. As always, good talking with you. And
likewise.
Look forward to talking with you again. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
You better believe it. Texas Congressman Mike McCaul, also the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, House Homeland Security Committee.